She worked 3 jobs, slept on a broken sofa in a studio apartment, no bigger than most people's bathrooms, and raised her daughter alone on prayers and pocket change. He owned a penthouse overlooking Central Park, ran a billion-dollar investment fund, and had more money than he could ever count. But when she walked into his penthouse for a job interview and did something no candidate had ever done before, both their lives would never be the same. How did one single mother, with nothing on her resume but calluses on her hands, earn a billionaire's trust, not with words, but with a wrench? Stay with me, because this story will change the way you see the people society overlooks. This is the story of Brianna Collins, a woman who proved that character is not written on a resume. It is written in what you do when no one is watching. It was a cold Thursday evening in Manhattan, the kind of evening where the wind cut through the streets like a blade, and the city lights reflected off wet pavement like scattered diamonds. High above it all, on the 52nd floor of one of the tallest residential buildings on the Upper West Side, a penthouse sat quietly in the dark. The floors were white marble cold under bare feet. The walls were made almost entirely of glass, giving a view of Central Park that most people only ever saw in magazines. The furniture was modern, clean, expensive. Everything in its place. Everything perfect. And everything empty. A coffee machine hummed softly in the open kitchen. It was one of those Italian machines that cost more than a used car. It brewed a perfect cup every time. But there was only one mug sitting beside it. There was always only one mug. Xavier Bennett stood by the window, looking out at the city below. He was 34 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with deep brown skin and a clean-shaved head that made him look older than he was. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and sweatpants. No watch, no shoes, just a man standing alone in a room that was too big for one person. Xavier was the founder and CEO of Bennett Capital Partners, one of the most successful real estate investment firms in the country. His company bought old, run-down apartment buildings in low-income neighborhoods, renovated them from top to bottom, and rented them out at prices regular people could actually afford. Affordable housing. That was his thing. That was what made him different from every other man in a suit on Wall Street. He had started with nothing. Grew up on the south side of Chicago. His mother Gloria worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. His father left when Xavier was 6 and never came back. Gloria raised him alone in a 1-bedroom apartment where the heat broke every winter and the landlord never fixed it. She died when Xavier was 16. Heart attack. Right there on the kitchen floor while she was making dinner. Xavier found her. He was the one who called the ambulance. He was the one who sat in the hospital waiting room alone because there was no one else to call. After that, Xavier made himself a promise. He would never be powerless again. He would never depend on anyone. And he would build something so big, so strong that no one could ever take it from him. And he did. By 25, he had his first million. By 30, his first 100 million. By 34, his net worth had crossed the billion-dollar mark. People called him a visionary. Forbes wrote about him. Business schools studied his model. He had everything the world said a man should want. But tonight, Xavier was just tired. Tired of the meetings. Tired of the handshakes. Tired of people who smiled at him because of what he had, not who he was. He took a sip of his coffee and sat down on the leather sofa. On the glass table in front of him sat a stack of resumes. Over 20 of them, all printed on thick, expensive paper. All from graduates of Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Wharton. Every single one of them perfect on paper. Perfect grades, perfect internships, perfect references. Xavier had interviewed every single one of them over the past 3 weeks. And every single one of them had left him feeling the same way. Empty. They all said the right things. They all sat up straight. They all smiled at the right moments and nodded at the right times. But none of them were real. None of them surprised him. None of them made him feel like they saw anything beyond the title and the money. He was looking for a personal assistant, someone who would be with him every day, in every meeting, in every decision. Someone he could trust. And trust was the one thing Xavier could not find on a resume. He picked up one of the resumes and stared at it. Yale. Summa cum laude. 3 years at Goldman Sachs. Fluent in 4 languages. On paper, this person was perfect. But during the interview, Xavier had asked one simple question. What would you do if you saw something broken and no one asked you to fix it? The candidate had blinked, confused, and said I would report it to the appropriate department. Xavier had ended the interview right there. He did not want someone who reported problems. He wanted someone who fixed them. But he did not know how to explain that to his HR team. He did not even know how to explain it to himself. He just knew that whatever he was looking for, he had not found it yet. Xavier leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes. The penthouse was silent. The coffee was getting cold. The city glowed outside the window like a living thing. Millions of people moving, talking, living their lives. And here he was, alone, in the most expensive room in the building, with nothing but a stack of perfect resumes and a single coffee mug. He did not know it yet, but the answer to everything he had been searching for was about to walk through his front door. The next morning, across the city in a neighborhood Xavier had never set foot in, a woman named Brianna Collins was already awake. It was 4:30 in the morning. The alarm had not gone off yet. It did not need to. Brianna's body had learned to wake up before the sun a long time ago. There was too much to do to waste time sleeping. She sat up slowly on the sofa. It was not a bed. It was a small, sagging sofa with one broken leg propped up by a stack of old phone books. That sofa was where Brianna slept every night because the only bed in the studio apartment belonged to her daughter. The apartment was in the Bronx, on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like mildew and old cooking oil. It was barely bigger than a parking space. The kitchen, the bedroom, and the living room were all the same room. The walls were thin. You could hear the neighbors arguing at night, the baby crying 2 doors down, the pipes groaning inside the walls like something alive. Brianna stood up and stretched. Her back ached. It always ached. She walked the 3 steps to the kitchen area and turned on the faucet. The water came out cold. There was no hot water in the building this week. The landlord said he would fix it. He had been saying that for 2 months. She made a pot of coffee, the cheapest brand from the dollar store. It tasted bitter and thin, but it did the job. While the coffee brewed, she opened the refrigerator. Half a box of cereal, a carton of milk that was 1 day from expiring, 2 eggs. That was it. She poured the cereal into a small bowl for Amara, her daughter, and set it on the table. Then she cracked the 2 eggs into a pan for herself. She would need the energy today. Today was different from every other day. Brianna worked 3 jobs. In the mornings, she cleaned hotel rooms at a mid-range hotel in Midtown. In the afternoons, she delivered food through an app on her phone, biking through traffic in rain or heat. In the evenings, she washed dishes at a restaurant in Harlem. Between shifts, she picked up Amara from school and dropped her off with Mrs. Odom, the elderly woman who lived across the hall. Mrs. Odom was 71 years old, retired, and had a bad hip that made it hard for her to walk. She watched Amara for free. Well, not exactly free. Brianna fixed things for her in return. A leaking pipe 1 week. A broken cabinet hinge the next. A toilet that would not stop running. Whatever needed fixing, Brianna fixed it. That was the deal. That was how they survived. Not with money, but with hands and trust. Brianna knew how to fix things because her grandfather had taught her. Everyone called him Pops. He was a plumber in Baltimore, had been one for 40 years. His hands were rough like sandpaper, and his back was bent from decades of crawling under sinks and behind walls. But his mind was sharp, and his heart was bigger than anyone Brianna had ever known. Pops raised Brianna after her mother left. He taught her everything: how to read a pipe joint, how to tell if a faucet was leaking from the valve or the washer, how to fix a water heater with nothing but a wrench and patience. He used to say, fixing things is not about the thing, Bri. It is about paying attention. Most people do not break things on purpose. They just stop paying attention. Pops died when Brianna was 19. Lung cancer. He left her nothing but his old toolbox and a lifetime of knowledge that no school had ever given her. She still had that toolbox. It sat in the corner of her apartment, right next to the sofa where she slept. She never opened it anymore. But she never got rid of it either. At 5:15, Amara woke up. She was 5 years old with big brown eyes and 2 thick braids that Brianna did fresh every Sunday night. She padded out from behind the curtain that separated her bed from the rest of the apartment, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, Mama," she said in a sleepy voice. "Morning, baby. Breakfast is on the table." Amara climbed onto the chair and started eating her cereal. She looked at Brianna, who was standing by the sink, drinking her coffee and staring at her phone. "Mama, are we going somewhere nice today?" Brianna looked at her daughter. On the phone screen was an address, a penthouse on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. She had found the job listing online 3 days ago. Personal assistant to the CEO of a real estate company. No degree required. She had sent an email with no resume, just a short message explaining who she was and why she wanted the job. She had not expected a reply. But yesterday, a response came. "Come to this address Thursday morning at 10. Ask for Xavier Bennett." Brianna did not know who Xavier Bennett was. She had searched his name and nearly dropped her phone. A billionaire. She was going to a billionaire's penthouse for a job interview, a woman who cleaned hotel rooms for a living. She looked at Amara and smiled. Maybe, baby, maybe. That night, after putting Amara to bed, Brianna did something she had not done in a long time. She pulled out the one outfit she owned that was nice enough for an interview. A pair of dark slacks and a cream-colored blouse. Both from a thrift store. Both clean but wrinkled. She did not own an iron, so she did what she always did. She boiled a pot of water, held the clothes up on a hanger, and pressed the hot bottom of the pot against the fabric, slowly, carefully, working out each wrinkle one at a time. It took almost an hour, but when she was done, the clothes looked decent. Not perfect, but decent. She hung them on the back of the door and lay down on the sofa. Through the thin wall she could hear the pipes groaning. Somewhere in the building a faucet was dripping. Brianna closed her eyes and listened to it. Drip, drip, drip. She knew exactly what was wrong. A worn washer, a 10-cent part that the landlord would never replace. She whispered into the dark, "Please, just let something good happen tomorrow. Just this once." Then she fell asleep. The next morning, Brianna dropped Amara off at Mrs. Odom's door at 7:30. "You look nice," Mrs. Odom said, looking Brianna up and down with a knowing smile. "Big day interview," Brianna said. "Uptown." Mrs. Odom raised her eyebrows. "Uptown, uptown." Brianna nodded. "Well, go on then. Amara and I will be just fine." She reached out and squeezed Brianna's hand. "You deserve this, child. Whatever it is, you deserve something good." Brianna squeezed back, but said nothing. She had stopped believing in deserving things a long time ago. She just believed in showing up. She walked to the subway station 6 blocks away. The morning air was sharp and cold. Her shoes, the nicest pair she owned, were black flats with a small scuff on the left toe. She had tried to cover it with a marker the night before. It almost worked. The subway ride from the Bronx to the Upper West Side took 45 minutes. Brianna stood the whole way because there were no empty seats. She watched the stations pass through the window. The neighborhoods changed slowly, like someone turning a dial. First, the graffiti-covered walls and flickering lights of the Bronx stations. Then the cleaner platforms of Harlem. Then the polished tile and bright advertisements of the Upper West Side. When she came up from the station, the air felt different. Cleaner, quieter. The buildings were taller here. The sidewalks were wider. People walked with purpose, dressed in long coats and carrying leather bags. No one looked at Brianna. She was invisible here, just another face in the crowd. Or maybe not even that. She found the building easily. It was impossible to miss. A tall glass tower with a dark green awning and gold lettering above the entrance. A doorman stood outside in a pressed uniform with white gloves. Brianna took a deep breath and walked up to him. "Good morning," she said. "I have an appointment with Mr. Xavier Bennett, 10 o'clock. The doorman looked at her. His eyes moved slowly from her face to her shoes, from her shoes to her bag, a small, worn purse she had owned for 6 years. His expression did not change, but Brianna could feel it. That look, the one that said, "You do not belong here." "Name?" he asked flatly. "Brianna Collins." He picked up a phone behind the desk and dialed. Brianna stood in the lobby and waited. The floor was marble polished, so clean she could see her own reflection in it. A woman in a fur coat walked past, trailing the scent of something expensive. A man in a suit talked loudly into his phone about stock options. No one looked at Brianna. She did not look down. She stood straight, shoulders back, chin up. Just the way Pops taught her. "You do not need to look rich to be worth something," he used to say. She held on to that now, like a rope. After what felt like forever, the doorman hung up the phone. 52nd floor. Private elevator on the left. Brianna walked to the elevator. The doors opened with a soft chime. Inside, the walls were lined with mirrors. She stepped in and pressed the button. It was brass cold under her fingertip. As the elevator rose, Brianna caught her reflection in the mirror. She saw herself clearly for the first time that morning. The blouse she had ironed with a pot. The slacks from the thrift store. The scuffed flats. The purse, with the broken zipper she had sewn shut by hand. She looked at herself and saw every struggle, every long night, every skipped meal. But she also saw something else. She saw a woman who was still standing, still showing up, still climbing. The elevator slowed. The number on the screen read 52. Brianna took one last breath. The doors opened. What Brianna saw when the doors opened took her breath away. The penthouse stretched out before her like something from a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A view of Central Park so wide it looked like a painting. Warm light from hidden fixtures. A kitchen with a marble island longer than her entire apartment. And silence. The deep, heavy silence of a place where only one person lived. Xavier stood near the kitchen island holding a cup of coffee. He wore a white dress shirt untucked with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Dark slacks, no tie. He looked relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. "Watching, always watching." "Brianna Collins?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Come in, please. Have a seat." He gestured toward the living area where 2 large sofas faced each other across a glass table. Brianna stepped inside. Her shoes were quiet on the hardwood floor. She followed Xavier toward the sofas, but as she passed the kitchen, she heard it. Drip. She slowed down. Drip. Her head turned slightly to the left toward the sink. Drip. It was a sound most people would not even notice. Background noise. A tiny, steady beat of water hitting stainless steel. But to Brianna, it was loud. It was the loudest sound in the room. She knew what it was before she even looked. A leaking faucet. The kind of leak that starts small and gets worse over time. The kind of leak that costs you money on your water bill every month and ruins the finish on your sink if you leave it long enough. The kind of leak that a 10-cent rubber washer could fix in 5 minutes. Now, most people would have ignored it. Most people would have sat down on that expensive sofa, smiled politely, and answered whatever questions the billionaire asked them. Most people would not have said a word about a dripping faucet in someone else's home. But Brianna was not most people. She stopped walking. Xavier noticed. He turned around. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Excuse me, Mr. Bennett," Brianna said. "Do you mind if I—" She did not finish the sentence. She was already walking toward the sink. Xavier stood there, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. He watched as this woman, this stranger who had been in his home for less than 30 seconds, walked straight past his expensive sofas, past his glass table, past everything, and went directly to his kitchen sink. Brianna crouched down and opened the cabinet beneath the sink. She looked at the pipes, the valves, the connections. Her eyes moved the way a doctor's eyes move when reading a chart. Quick, focused, trained. She reached in and touched the cold water valve, gently feeling for vibration. Then she found it. The valve seat was worn and the washer was not sealing properly. Now, here is something most people do not know. A dripping faucet is almost never a big problem. 9 times out of 10, it is a small rubber washer inside the valve that has gotten old and lost its shape. It is a part that costs less than $1. But most people call a plumber, pay $200, and the plumber replaces that same tiny washer in 5 minutes. Knowing where to look is the difference between a $200 problem and a 2-minute fix. Brianna knew where to look. She tightened the packing nut around the valve stem with her fingers. Just enough to compress the washer back into place. Not too tight. Tight enough. She listened. The dripping slowed. Then it stopped. Silence. Complete silence. Brianna stood up. She wiped her hands on the sides of her slacks because there was no towel nearby. She straightened her blouse, walked back to where Xavier was standing, and looked at him calmly. "Sorry about that," she said. "The dripping was going to bother me the whole interview." Then she sat down on the sofa. Xavier did not move. He stood there for a long moment, his coffee cup still in his hand, his eyes fixed on the woman who had just sat down across from him like she had done nothing unusual at all. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Not at her clothes, not at her shoes, not at the purse with the sewn-shut zipper. He looked at her hands. They were not soft. They were working hands. Hands that had fixed things, carried things, built things. Hands that had held a child and tightened a valve in the same morning. In that moment, something shifted inside Xavier Bennett. Something quiet but deep, like a key turning in a lock that had been stuck for years. 20 candidates from the best schools in the country had sat on that very sofa. 20 people with perfect resumes and perfect answers and perfect smiles. Not a single one of them had heard the faucet. Not a single one of them had looked at his home and seen something that needed fixing. They had seen a penthouse. Brianna had seen a leaking faucet. Xavier didn't know it yet, but in that moment the interview was already over. Brianna had already gotten the job. Xavier sat down across from Brianna. He placed his coffee cup on the glass table and leaned back. For a moment he just looked at her, not the way the doorman had looked at her, not the way people on the subway looked at her. He looked at her the way you look at someone who just showed you something you were not expecting to see. So he said, "Tell me something that is not on your resume." Brianna let out a small, nervous laugh. "That would be easy, sir. There is nothing on my resume." Xavier tilted his head. "Nothing. I do not have one," Brianna said honestly. "I never needed one. The kind of jobs I work, they do not ask for resumes. They ask if you can show up on time and if your back is strong enough. Most people would have been embarrassed to say that in a billionaire's penthouse. But Brianna said it the way she said everything. Straight. No apology, no shame, just the truth." Xavier nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Then tell me something about yourself. Something real." Brianna thought for a moment. She looked down at her hands, the rough skin, the short nails, the small scar on her left thumb from a pipe fitting that slipped when she was 14. "My grandfather raised me," she said. "Everyone called him Pops. He was a plumber in Baltimore, 40 years. He could fix anything. Sinks, toilets, water heaters, radiators. If it had a pipe or a valve, Pops could make it work again. He sounds like a good man," Xavier said. "He was the best man I ever knew," Brianna said quietly. "He taught me everything. Not just about plumbing. About life. He used to say something that I never forgot." "What was that?" Brianna looked up at Xavier. "He said fixing things is not about the thing. It is about paying attention. Most people do not break things on purpose. They just stop paying attention." The room went quiet. Xavier did not respond right away. He just sat there staring at Brianna like she had reached inside his chest and pulled out something he had been carrying for years without knowing it. Because that sentence, those simple words from an old plumber in Baltimore, described exactly what Xavier had been feeling about his company, his team, his entire life. People around him had stopped paying attention. They showed up. They did their jobs. They said the right things. But they did not see what was right in front of them. They did not notice what was broken. And here was a woman who noticed a dripping faucet in a stranger's kitchen within 30 seconds of walking through the door. Brianna, Xavier said, leaning forward. I am going to be honest with you. I have interviewed over 20 people for this position. Graduates from Harvard, Yale, Columbia, people with perfect grades and perfect internships and perfect answers to every question I asked. And Brianna asked. And not one of them noticed my faucet was leaking. Brianna blinked. She did not know what to say. Xavier continued. Do you know why I hold interviews here instead of at my office? No, sir. Because an office is a performance space. People walk in, they sit where you tell them to sit, they say what they think you want to hear, and they leave. But a home is real. A home tells you the truth. And I wanted to see if anyone who walked in here would see the truth. He paused. You are the first person who did. Brianna felt heat rise to her face. She was not used to being praised. She was used to being overlooked. Mr. Bennett, she said, I appreciate that. I really do. But I should be honest with you too. I do not have a college degree. I have never worked in an office. I do not know how to use Excel. I do not know how to schedule meetings or answer phones the way a real assistant does. I know I am not what you are looking for on paper. Xavier smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. Paper, he said, is the last thing I am looking for. He leaned back and folded his arms. I can teach you Excel in a week. I can teach you email scheduling, filing, all of it. Those are skills. Skills can be learned by anyone willing to put in the work. But what you did just now, walking into a stranger's home and fixing something without being asked, that is not a skill. That is character, and character cannot be taught. Brianna sat very still. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her face calm. Can you start Monday? Xavier asked. Brianna stared at him. Excuse me, Monday. Can you start Monday? Mr. Bennett, are you serious? I do not joke about hiring decisions, Brianna. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Then she opened it again. But no words came out, because a part of her, a deep, scarred, tired part that had been let down too many times, would not let her say yes. Not yet. Can I think about it? She asked quietly. Xavier looked surprised. No one had ever asked him that before. Everyone always said yes, immediately, eagerly. But Brianna Collins was sitting on his sofa, looking at a life-changing opportunity and asking for time to think. Of course, he said. Take all the time you need. But Brianna did not say yes. Not yet. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. Brianna stood in the mirrored box, staring at her reflection, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. And that terrified her. She walked out of the building and back to the subway. The cold air hit her face like a slap. The noise of the city came rushing back. Car horns, construction voices. She pulled her thin jacket tighter and started walking. On the train ride home, Brianna sat by the window and watched the stations pass in reverse. The clean platforms of the Upper West Side faded into the flickering lights of the Bronx. The well-dressed passengers disappeared, one by one, replaced by tired faces and heavy coats. And as the train rocked and rattled beneath the city, Brianna's mind raced. People like Xavier Bennett do not help people like me for free. There is always a catch. There is always a price. She had learned that lesson the hard way. Her last real job, the one at the restaurant in Harlem, the owner had promised to make her full-time. Benefits. Steady pay. She had worked doubles for 3 months straight to prove herself. Then he hired his nephew instead and told Brianna her services were no longer needed. And before that, there was Darnell, Amara's father. He had promised to stay, promised to be there when the baby came, promised to build a life with her. He left 6 weeks before Amara was born. No note, no call, no forwarding address, just gone, like smoke. Brianna had stopped trusting promises after that. Promises were just words people used to get what they wanted before they disappeared. So, why should this be any different? Why should a billionaire in a penthouse care about a woman who cleans hotel rooms? What did he really want? By the time she reached her stop, the doubt had wrapped itself around her chest like a rope. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment and opened the door. Mrs. Odom was sitting on the sofa with Amara on her lap, reading a picture book. Mama Amara jumped up and ran to her. Brianna knelt down and hugged her tight, pressing her face into her daughter's hair. She smelled like crayons and peanut butter. "Did you get the job?" Mama Brianna pulled back and looked at her daughter's face. Those big, hopeful eyes. "We will see, baby," Brianna said. "We will see." Mrs. Odom stood up slowly, her bad hip making her wince. She looked at Brianna with that knowing look she always had, like she could read everything on Brianna's face, without a single word being spoken. "How was it?" Mrs. Odom asked. "He offered me the job," Brianna said. Mrs. Odom's eyebrows shot up. "He offered you the job, and you are standing here looking like someone stole your lunch." Brianna shook her head. "I do not know, Mrs. Odom. It feels too good. Things that feel too good always end bad." Mrs. Odom walked over and took Brianna's hands in hers. Her fingers were warm and wrinkled the hands of a woman who had lived long enough to know a few things. "Child," she said softly, "you have been fixing everyone else's problems your whole life. Your grandfather's legacy, my pipes, this building, everyone else. When are you going to let someone fix something for you?" Brianna looked away. She did not have an answer. That night, after putting Amara to bed, Brianna lay on the broken sofa and stared at the ceiling. The apartment was dark. The pipes were groaning in the walls. Somewhere above her, a neighbor was watching television with the volume too loud. She turned her head and looked at the corner of the room. Pop's toolbox sat there right where it always sat. Old, dented, covered in scratches. She had not opened it in months, but it was always there, like a quiet reminder of who she was and where she came from. Amara's voice came back to her, small and clear, like a bell. Pops would say, "Go for it." And Mrs. Odom's words, "Let someone fix something for you for once." Brianna closed her eyes. Her chest felt tight, her throat felt thick. She lay there in the dark for a long time, listening to the pipes, listening to her daughter breathe behind the curtain, listening to the city outside. Then she picked up her phone. The screen lit up her face in the dark room. She opened her messages and typed 4 words. "I will be there Monday." She pressed send before she could change her mind. Then she put the phone down, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and whispered to herself, "One more time. I will trust one more time." Monday morning came faster than Brianna expected. She was up at 4 like always. Coffee, like always. Amara's cereal, like always. But today was not like always. She dropped Amara at Mrs. Odom's door at 7:30. Mrs. Odom squeezed her hand and said, "Go show them who you are." Brianna took the subway to Midtown Manhattan. The Bennett Capital Partners office was on the 38th floor of a glass tower on 6th Avenue. She had looked it up online the night before. The company managed over $4 billion in real estate investments. It had 200 employees, and now one of those employees was her. The lobby of the building was nothing like the Penthouse. It was louder, colder, more people. Everyone moved fast. Everyone looked busy. The floors were polished stone that clicked under expensive shoes. The air smelled like fresh flowers and strong perfume. Men in tailored suits carried leather briefcases. Women in sharp dresses typed on their phones while walking, never looking up. Brianna stood just inside the revolving door for a moment. She was wearing the same blouse and slacks from the interview, the only professional clothes she owned. Her shoes were the same scuffed black flats. Her purse was the same old one with the sewn zipper. She took a breath and walked to the elevator. The 38th floor was all glass and clean lines, open desks, bright lights, computer screens glowing on every surface. The sound of keyboards clicking filled the air like rain on a tin roof. People talked in low professional voices about numbers and timelines and projections. A young woman from Human Resources met Brianna at the elevator. She was friendly but formal. She handed Brianna a badge, a laptop, and a company phone, then led her to a desk just outside Xavier's corner office. "This is your workstation," the woman said. "Mr. Bennett's schedule is in Outlook. His calls are forwarded to this line. If you need anything, Renee Whitfield's office is down the hall." Then she left. Just like that, Brianna sat down in the chair. It was an expensive chair, the kind that adjusts in 6 different ways. She did not know how to adjust it. She opened the laptop. The screen lit up with icons and folders and programs she had never seen before. Outlook, Slack, SharePoint, Google Drive. It might as well have been written in another language. She stared at the screen. For the first time since she walked into Xavier's penthouse, Brianna felt something she was not used to feeling. Fear. Not the fear of hunger or cold or being alone. Those she knew. This was different. This was the fear of failing at something she actually wanted. She could fix a water heater in the dark. She could unclog a drain with nothing but a wire hanger. She could carry 50 pounds of cement up 3 flights of stairs without stopping, but she did not know how to send a calendar invite. Down the hall, a door opened. Renee Whitfield stepped out of her office and walked toward Xavier's. She was tall, sharp-featured, with natural hair pulled back tight and reading glasses perched on her nose. She wore a black blazer and carried a tablet under her arm. Everything about her said efficiency. She glanced at Brianna as she passed. It was a quick look, brief, but Brianna felt it. It was the look of someone measuring you and coming up short. A few minutes later, Brianna heard voices through Xavier's office door. Renee's voice was clear and direct. "You hired a hotel maid with no experience to be your personal assistant. I hope you know what you are doing." There was a pause. Then Xavier's voice, calm and steady. "I always know what I am doing, Renee. She does not know Outlook. She will learn. She does not have a degree. Neither did my mother. And she was the smartest person I ever knew." Silence. Then the sound of Renee's heels clicking back down the hallway. Brianna sat at her desk and stared at the laptop screen. Her hands were shaking, but she placed them on the keyboard anyway. She did not know where to start. But she was going to start. Because Brianna Collins did not give up. She had never had that luxury. The first week was brutal. There was no other word for it. On Monday, Brianna sent an email meant for Xavier's accountant to his entire contact list. 312 people received a message about a tax form that was supposed to be confidential. It took the IT department an hour to recall it. Brianna sat at her desk the whole time feeling like the floor might swallow her whole. On Tuesday, she scheduled 2 meetings at the same time. Xavier showed up to an empty conference room at 10, then found out his investor call had been moved to the same slot. He had to apologize to the investors. He did not yell at Brianna. He did not even frown. He just said, "Double-check the calendar before you confirm. Always." On Wednesday, she printed a 60-page report on the wrong paper size. Every single page came out cut off on the right side. She had to reprint the whole thing. It took her 45 minutes because she did not know how to change the paper tray. By Friday, Brianna had made 11 mistakes. She kept count. She wrote each one down in a small notebook she carried in her purse. Not because anyone told her to, because that was who she was. She paid attention. She tracked what went wrong so she could make sure it never went wrong again. Every evening after work, Brianna rode the subway home, picked up Amara from Mrs. Odom, made dinner with whatever was in the fridge, put her daughter to bed, and then sat down on the broken sofa with her phone. She opened YouTube and searched how to use Microsoft Outlook, how to create a calendar event, Excel for beginners, how to write a professional email. She watched tutorial after tutorial, pausing, rewinding, taking notes on the back of grocery receipts because she did not have a proper notebook at home. She practiced on her phone, creating fake events, writing fake emails, learning the language of the professional world, one video at a time. She studied until 1 in the morning, sometimes later. Then she set her alarm for 4:30, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and slept for 3 hours. Every single night, Amara would sometimes wake up and wander out from behind the curtain. "Mama, why are you still up?" "Just learning, baby. Go back to sleep." Brianna would tuck her back in, kiss her forehead, and go right back to the screen. The second week, Brianna made 7 mistakes. The third, week 3. By the end of the first month, she was down to 1, and even that one was small, a misspelling in a memo that she caught herself before anyone else saw it. Xavier noticed. He did not say anything to Brianna directly. He did not need to. But one afternoon he stopped by Renee's office and leaned against the doorframe. "How is Brianna doing?" he asked. Renee looked up from her tablet. Her expression was the same, as always controlled, measured. But there was something different in her voice, something that sounded almost like reluctant respect. "She made 3 mistakes this week," Renee said. "Last week it was 11, she paused. "So, improving." Xavier nodded. "Good. She still does not know how to use pivot tables." "Do you know how to fix a burst pipe?" Renee stared at him. Xavier smiled and walked away. That same week, Xavier held an internal meeting with his senior team. Brianna sat in the corner of the conference room with a notepad taking minutes. She was quiet. She always was in meetings. She listened more than she spoke, which was rare in a room full of people who loved the sound of their own voices. At one point, Xavier was discussing a new hire for the acquisitions team. Someone suggested a candidate with 15 years of experience and a long list of credentials. Xavier shook his head. "Credentials are easy to collect," he said. "Character is not. The most dangerous hire is someone who thinks they already know everything. Give me someone hungry to learn over someone comfortable with what they know." Every time, Brianna looked down at her notepad. She wrote the sentence carefully, word by word. Then she circled it. She did not know why. It just felt important. That night on the subway ride home, she read it again. The most dangerous hire is someone who thinks they already know everything. She whispered it to herself like a prayer. 1 month and something happened that changed everything. It happened on a Tuesday morning, 9:15. Brianna was at her desk, organizing Xavier's schedule for the week, when she heard shouting from the lobby downstairs. She stood up and looked through the glass wall of Xavier's office. People were moving fast, too fast. Someone was running toward the elevator. A security guard was talking into his radio. Something was wrong. Brianna walked to the stairwell and listened. She could hear it before she saw it. A rushing sound, deep and low like a river running underground. Then a woman screamed from the floor below. Brianna took the stairs down to the ground floor. When she pushed open the stairwell door, she stopped. Water. Everywhere. It was spreading across the marble lobby floor in a thin, steady sheet, pouring out from under the door that led to the basement utility room. The floor was already covered. People were stepping back, lifting their bags, pulling their shoes away from the water like it was something dangerous. Renee was in the middle of the lobby phone, pressed to her ear, her voice sharp. "What do you mean 3 to 4 hours? We have investors arriving in 45 minutes. I do not care about your schedule. Get someone here now." She hung up and turned to Xavier, who had come down from his office. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight. "Building maintenance says the plumber cannot get here until this afternoon," Renee said. "A pipe burst in the basement. They think it is a main line." Xavier looked at the water creeping across the floor. The lobby of Bennett Capital Partners, one of the most respected investment firms in Manhattan, was flooding. And in less than an hour, a group of foreign investors would walk through the front door, expecting a polished professional environment. "Can we move the meeting?" Xavier asked. "To where?" Renee replied. "Every conference room is booked, and the investors are already on their way from the airport." Xavier rubbed his forehead. Around him, people were panicking. Someone suggested putting towels on the floor. Someone else suggested calling the fire department. No one knew what to do. No one knew where the water was coming from or how to stop it. No one except Brianna. She had been standing near the stairwell door, watching, listening. Her eyes moved from the water on the floor to the door leading to the basement. She had been in that basement before. 2 weeks ago, she had gone down there to find a replacement light bulb for Xavier's office lamp. She had noticed the utility room then. She had noticed the pipes. She had noticed the layout. Without saying a word, Brianna walked across the wet lobby floor. Her shoes splashed in the shallow water. She pushed open the basement door and disappeared down the stairs. The basement was dim and damp. The sound was louder here. A hissing, spraying sound, like a garden hose left on full blast. Water was pooling on the concrete floor, running toward a drain that could not keep up. Brianna moved quickly. She found the utility room at the end of the hall. The door was unlocked. Inside, the walls were lined with pipes, valves, gauges, and electrical panels. Most people would have looked at it and seen chaos. Brianna looked at it and saw a system. Now here is something that most people do not know but should. Every building, whether it is a house, an apartment, or a 40-story office tower, has a main shut-off valve. It is the one valve that controls all the water coming into the building. If a pipe bursts and water is flooding everywhere, the very first thing you should do is find that valve and close it. It will stop the water immediately. But here is the problem. 9 out of 10 people who live or work in a building have no idea where that valve is. They have never looked for it. They have never been told. And when an emergency happens, they panic, they call someone, and they wait. Meanwhile, the water keeps coming. Brianna did not wait. She scanned the wall of pipes and found the main valve in under 30 seconds. It was a large red handle near the bottom of the wall, partially hidden behind a shelf. She grabbed it with both hands and turned it clockwise, hard. The valve was stiff, had not been turned in years, but Brianna was strong. She forced it shut. The hissing stopped. The water stopped. Just like that. Then she followed the pipes to find the source of the burst. It did not take long. A coupling joint on one of the secondary lines had come loose. It was not a crack. It was not a major break. It was a fitting that had vibrated itself free over time, probably from years of water pressure and no maintenance. A wrench and 10 minutes would fix it. Brianna found a toolbox on the shelf next to the valve. She opened it, pulled out an adjustable wrench, and went to work. She tightened the coupling, checked the seal, then slowly reopened the main valve, watching carefully for any drip or spray. Nothing. The pipe held. She wiped her hands on her slacks, closed the toolbox, and walked back upstairs. When she stepped into the lobby, the water had already started to recede. Maintenance workers were mopping the floor. Renee was on the phone again. Xavier was standing by the elevator, arms crossed, watching the cleanup. Brianna walked past everyone without a word and went back to her desk on the 38th floor. She sat down, opened her laptop, and continued working on Xavier's schedule. Like nothing had happened. 20 minutes later, the investors arrived. The lobby was clean. The floors were dry. The meeting went perfectly. The investors signed a preliminary agreement worth $80 million. They never knew what had happened that morning. No one told them, but Xavier knew. He had watched Brianna disappear into the basement. He had seen her come back up, calm, quiet, with wet shoes and damp hands. He had asked Renee what happened. Renee told him. She went to the basement, found the shut-off valve, stopped the water, and fixed the pipe by herself in 20 minutes. Xavier said nothing. He stood in the glass-walled conference room, shaking hands with the investors, smiling, talking about growth projections and market trends. But his eyes kept drifting through the glass wall to the desk, outside his office, Brianna's desk. She was sitting there typing, her face calm, as if she had not just saved a multi-million-dollar deal with a wrench and a pair of steady hands. She did not ask for permission. She did not wait for instructions. She did not look around for someone else to handle it. She just saw what needed to be done and did it. And in that moment, Xavier felt something shift inside him again, something deeper than the first time. He thought about his mother, Gloria. She was like that. When the heat broke in their apartment in Chicago, Gloria did not call the landlord. She went to the hardware store, bought the part herself, and fixed it. When the kitchen faucet leaked, she fixed it. When the car would not start, she figured it out. She never waited for rescue. She never asked for help. She just did what needed doing. Brianna was the same. And Xavier was beginning to realize that this woman, who had walked into his penthouse a month ago in thrift store clothes and scuffed shoes, was the most remarkable person he had ever met. But Brianna did not know any of that. She just went back to work. Over the weeks that followed, something changed between Xavier and Brianna. It was subtle at first, almost invisible, but it was there. Xavier started asking Brianna questions. Not about his schedule or his meetings. Real questions. Questions about life, about people, about things that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or investor reports. One afternoon, Xavier called Brianna into his office. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city. On his desk was a set of architectural plans for a new housing project in the Bronx. Affordable apartments for low-income families. It was one of his biggest projects yet. "What do you think of these?" he asked, pointing at the plans. Brianna looked at the blueprints. She studied them carefully. The layouts, the room sizes, the kitchens. "I do not know anything about real estate, Mr. Bennett," she said slowly. "But I know what it is like to live in a building where the landlord does not care, where the heat does not work and the pipes leak and nobody comes to fix anything." She paused. "If you are building these for people like me, then maybe you should ask people like me what they need." Xavier stared at her. For a long time he said nothing. Then he picked up the phone and called his design team. "I want a community feedback session before we finalize these plans," he said. "Real tenants, real input. Set it up this week." He hung up and looked at Brianna. "Thank you." "For what?" "For telling me the truth. Everyone else in this building tells me what I want to hear. You tell me what I need to hear. That is rare." Brianna shrugged. "I just said what I know, sir." "That is exactly the point." Xavier began including Brianna in more conversations. He asked her opinion on building materials, on floor plans, on neighborhood selection, not because she was an expert. She was not, but because she had lived the life that his tenants would live. She knew what mattered. She knew what was broken. And people noticed. At first it was small things, a raised eyebrow here, a whispered conversation there. But within a few weeks, the rumors had spread through the office like smoke. "Have you seen how much time she spends in his office? She is a personal assistant. Why is she looking at architectural plans? She is sleeping with him. That is the only explanation." The whispers came from everywhere. The break room, the elevator, the bathroom. They were never said to Brianna's face. They were always behind her back, just loud enough for her to catch pieces of them as she walked past. Gold digger. She is using him. She fixed a pipe. That does not make her a business advisor. That last one was Renee. Brianna heard her say it to a colleague in the hallway outside the conference room. Renee did not say it with cruelty. She said it with concern, genuine concern for Xavier and for the company. But it stung all the same. Brianna did not react. She did not confront anyone. She did not defend herself. She just kept working. She answered Xavier's calls. She organized his calendar. She took notes in meetings. She did her job, but that night, after picking up Amara from Mrs. Odom and putting her to bed, Brianna sat alone in the dark apartment. The pipes groaned. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. The ceiling had a water stain that seemed to grow a little bigger every week. She sat on the broken sofa and pulled her knees to her chest. She thought about the whispers. She thought about the looks. She thought about the woman in the bathroom who had stopped talking the moment Brianna walked in, then started laughing the moment she walked out. She had been through worse, much worse. She had slept on the street. She had gone days without eating. She had been fired, cheated, abandoned. But this was different. This hurt in a different way. Because for the first time in her life, she had started to feel like she belonged somewhere. And now the place she belonged was telling her she did not. The whispers were just the beginning. What came next would push Brianna to her breaking point. 3 weeks later, Xavier invited Brianna to a company dinner. It was not a party. It was a formal event, a dinner to celebrate the closing of a major deal held at an upscale restaurant in Tribeca. Partners, investors, board members, and senior staff were all invited. Xavier wanted Brianna there because she had played a direct role in saving the investor meeting. He told her so himself. "You earned your seat at that table, Brianna. I want you there." Brianna almost said no. She did not own anything fancy enough for a dinner like that. But Xavier had thought of that. He had his assistant arrange for a dress to be delivered to her apartment. It was emerald green, simple, elegant. Brianna put it on and looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. The restaurant was the kind of place that had cloth napkins and candles on every table. Soft music played from speakers hidden somewhere in the ceiling. The walls were dark wood. The lighting was warm. Everyone was dressed like they had walked out of a magazine. Brianna sat at the main table next to Xavier. She kept her hands in her lap and her back straight. She smiled when people spoke to her. She said thank you when the waiter poured her water. She was polite. She was calm. She was doing everything right. And then Victoria Langston walked in. Victoria was tall, sharp-featured, with honey-brown skin and hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than Brianna's rent for a year. She was a partner at a venture capital firm and one of the most connected women in New York finance. She was also Xavier's ex-girlfriend. Victoria made her way through the room, greeting people with air kisses and practiced smiles. When she reached Xavier's table, her eyes swept over Brianna the way a person's eyes sweep over a piece of furniture they have not decided whether to keep. "Xavier," she said warmly. "Lovely event. As always." Then she turned to Brianna. "And who is this?" "This is Brianna Collins," Xavier said. "She works with me." Victoria tilted her head. "Works with you? How wonderful." She sat down across from them and picked up her wine glass. "Tell me, Brianna, where did you go to school?" The table went quiet. Not completely, but enough. Enough for Brianna to feel it. "I did not finish college," Brianna said. Her voice was steady. Victoria raised her eyebrows. "Oh, how refreshing." She took a sip of wine and smiled. Xavier always did like his charity cases. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person at the table heard it. Every person froze. The waiter stopped mid-pour. Someone coughed nervously. Brianna felt her face burn. She felt the old, familiar feeling rising up from her stomach. Shame, anger, the urge to shrink, to disappear, to be invisible again. But she did not shrink. She did not look away. She looked directly at Victoria Langston and spoke clearly. "I may not have a degree, Miss Langston, but I know the difference between a person who builds things and a person who just buys them." Silence again. But this time, it was different. This time, the silence was not pity. It was something else. Something closer to respect. Victoria's smile faltered. Her wineglass paused halfway to her lips. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Xavier spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not stand up. He simply placed his hand on the back of Brianna's chair and looked at Victoria the way you look at someone who has just made a very serious mistake. "Brianna is not a charity case," he said. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath it. "She is the most capable person in this room, and I would trust her with my life before I would trust most people in it with my lunch order." Then he picked up his fork and started eating. Like nothing had happened, Victoria said nothing for the rest of the dinner. She left early. On the ride home, Brianna sat in the passenger seat of Xavier's car and stared out the window. The city lights blurred past like streaks of paint on glass. She was quiet for a long time. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what you said back there? I meant every word." "I know you did." She paused. "But it does not change anything, does it?" Xavier glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "Your world, Xavier, the people in it, they will never see me as one of them, no matter what I do, no matter how many pipes I fix or meetings I save. I will always be the charity case, the girl from the Bronx, the one without the degree." Xavier was quiet. He wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her she was wrong. But he could feel the truth in her words, heavy and real like a stone sitting in his chest. "You are not what they say you are," he said softly. "I know that," Brianna replied. "But sometimes knowing is not enough." She turned back to the window, and Xavier felt for the first time that he was losing her. Not to another person, not to another job, but to a wall that neither of them had built, a wall that the world had put between them and that no amount of money could tear down. That night Brianna could not sleep. She lay on the broken sofa in her apartment, staring at the ceiling. The pipes were quiet for once. Amara was sleeping behind the curtain, her breathing soft and steady. The apartment was dark. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting a pale orange glow through the small window. Brianna's mind would not stop. She kept hearing Victoria's voice. Charity case. She kept seeing the faces at the table. The polite smiles hiding judgment. The raised eyebrows. The way people looked at her dress and just knew that it was not hers. But it was not just the dinner. It was everything. The whispers at the office, the looks in the elevator, the laughter that stopped whenever she walked into a room. She had endured it all for weeks quietly, without complaint, because that was who she was. She endured, she pushed through, she fixed what was broken and kept moving. But tonight, something inside her cracked, not broke, cracked, like a pipe that has been holding pressure for too long. She sat up and looked around the apartment. Her eyes moved from the curtain where Amara slept to the corner where Pops's old toolbox sat, then to the table near the door where she kept her keys and her Bennett Capital ID badge. She picked up the badge and held it in the dim light. Her photo looked back at her. Brianna Collins, personal assistant to the CEO. She had been so proud the day they took that photo. She had smiled for the first time in months. But now, the badge felt heavy, like a chain, because Brianna had realized something she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was falling in love with Xavier Bennett. She did not want to. She had fought it. She had told herself it was gratitude, not love. Respect, not love. Admiration, not love. But it was love. She knew it the way she knew a pipe was about to burst, a quiet rumble you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. And that was exactly why she had to leave. Not because she was weak. Because she was strong enough to see what was coming. If she stayed, the rumors would get worse. The scrutiny would grow. Xavier's reputation would suffer. His business partners would question his judgment. His board would lose confidence. And Amara, her daughter, would grow up hearing people call her mother a gold digger. Brianna would not let that happen. She would not be the reason Xavier Bennett's empire cracked, and she would not raise her daughter in the shadow of other people's cruelty. She stood up quietly and walked to the table. She took out a piece of paper and a pen. For a long time she just stared at the blank page. Then she wrote, "Thank you for believing in me, Mr. Bennett. But I do not belong in your world. I hope you find someone who does." She folded the letter carefully. She set it aside. Then she packed her small bag. The same bag she had carried into the penthouse on the day of her interview. She folded her clothes. She put Pops's toolbox by the door. She placed the company laptop and phone on the table next to the letter. She did not cry. She wanted to, but she did not. At 4:30 in the morning, before the sun came up, Brianna got dressed. She woke Amara gently. "Come on, baby, we are going to Mrs. Odom's early today." "Why, Mama has some things to do." She dropped Amara off, hugged Mrs. Odom without explaining, and took the subway to Midtown one last time. The office was empty at 5 in the morning. The security guard let her in with her badge. She rode the elevator to the 38th floor alone. She placed the letter on her desk. She placed the badge next to it. She locked the door to the basement utility room, the room she had come to think of as hers, and slid the key under Xavier's office door. Then she walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and rode it down to the lobby. She stepped out into the cold morning air. The sky was still dark. The street lamps glowed orange against the pavement. The city was quiet, the way it only ever is before dawn. She did not look back. She could not. Xavier arrived at the office at 8:15 the next morning. He had not slept well. Something had felt off when he woke up, a heaviness in his chest he could not explain, like the air before a storm. He stepped out of the elevator on the 38th floor. The office was already humming. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, people moving. Everything normal, everything in its place. Except one thing. Brianna's desk was empty. Xavier slowed down. He looked at the desk. The laptop was there, closed, centered perfectly on the surface. The company phone sat beside it, and next to the phone was a folded piece of paper. And on top of the paper was her ID badge, face up with her photo, looking at the ceiling. Xavier picked up the letter. He unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words. Then he read them again. Then a third time. "Thank you for believing in me, Mr. Bennett. But I do not belong in your world. I hope you find someone who does." His hand started shaking. It was a small shake, barely visible, but it was there. He stood in the middle of the open office, surrounded by 200 people, and felt completely alone. He read the line again, "I do not belong in your world," and something inside him cracked, because he had heard those words before. Not from Brianna, from his mother. Gloria Bennett had said almost the exact same thing over and over her whole life. "People like us do not get to have nice things, Xavier. I am just a cleaning lady. I do not belong in those places." She had worked herself to death, believing that. She had cleaned hotel rooms and office buildings and rich people's houses, and she had never once believed she deserved more. She had never once asked for help. She had never once stopped working long enough to let someone take care of her. And she died. Right there, on a kitchen floor in Chicago. Alone. Exhausted. 43 years old. Xavier had made a promise that day, standing in a hospital hallway at 16 years old, wearing a t-shirt 2 sizes too big because it was the only clean one he had. He promised himself he would never let another person live like that. He would never let another person believe they were not good enough. He would never stand by and watch someone destroy themselves with the lie that they did not belong. And now Brianna was doing exactly that. The same words, the same lie, the same disappearing act. Xavier folded the letter carefully and slid it into his jacket pocket. He walked into his office and closed the door. He stood by the window and looked out at the city. He did not call anyone. He did not check his emails. He just stood there. A few minutes later there was a knock. Renee opened the door and stepped in. She was holding her tablet ready to review the morning schedule, but she stopped when she saw Xavier's face. "What happened?" she asked. Xavier did not turn around. "She left." Renee paused. "Left? What do you mean she left, Brianna?" "She is gone. She left a letter on her desk." Silence. Renee stood there for a moment. Then she set her tablet down slowly. "What did the letter say?" Xavier's jaw tightened. "She said she does not belong in my world." More silence. Renee did not say anything. She did not offer advice. She did not say, "I told you so." She just looked at Xavier Bennett, the man she had worked beside for 6 years, the man she had seen close billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, and for the first time she saw him break. "I let her leave," Xavier said quietly. "I let her think she was not good enough, and I did nothing." He turned away from the window, grabbed his car keys from the desk, and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Renee asked. Xavier did not answer. He walked past her through the office, into the elevator. He did not tell his driver. He did not tell his secretary. He got into his car and drove. He was going to find her. He had to. Xavier drove to the Bronx. He did not know Brianna's exact address. She had mentioned her neighborhood once in passing during one of their conversations. She had said it was near a bodega with a green awning and a laundromat that smelled like bleach. That was all he had. It was strange driving through these streets. Xavier Bennett, the man whose name was on buildings in Midtown Manhattan, was now crawling through the Bronx in his Porsche looking for a green awning. The car drew stares. People on the sidewalk watched it pass like it was something from another planet, and in a way it was. Xavier parked on a side street and got out. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red. He had not shaved. He looked nothing like the man who appeared in Forbes magazine. He looked like a man who had not slept and could not stop thinking about a letter that said 7 words that cut deeper than any business loss ever had. He started walking. He went into a bodega on the corner. "Excuse me, do you know a woman named Brianna Collins? She has a little girl, about 5 years old." The man behind the counter shook his head. Xavier tried the laundromat next door. Same question, same answer. He walked 2 more blocks. He asked a woman pushing a stroller. She did not know Brianna. He asked an old man sitting on a folding chair outside a barber shop. The man shrugged and went back to his newspaper. For the first time in his adult life, Xavier Bennett had no leverage. No phone call to make. No assistant to dispatch. No checkbook to open. He was just a man walking through a neighborhood he did not know, asking strangers for help, and no one was helping. He kept walking, block after block. His expensive shoes were getting dusty. His legs were tired. The sun was hot. He passed cracked sidewalks and overflowing trash cans and buildings with broken windows. He saw children playing in a fire hydrant spray. He saw a woman hanging laundry on a fire escape. He saw the world that Brianna came from, the world she had described to him, and for the first time he did not just hear about it, he was standing in it. After almost 2 hours, Xavier found himself on a narrow street lined with old brick apartment buildings. A small grocery store sat on the corner. Across the street, an elderly woman was sweeping the steps of her building. She moved slowly, favoring her left side, wincing every few steps. Xavier walked up to her. "Excuse me, ma'am. I am looking for someone. A young woman named Brianna Collins. She lives around here. She has a daughter named Amara." The woman stopped sweeping. She looked at Xavier from his shoes to his face. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Xavier Bennett. I was her employer." Xavier paused. "She left, and I need to find her." The woman leaned on her broom. "You are the one from the office, the rich one." "Yes, ma'am. She told me about you." The woman studied him for a long moment. Her eyes moved across his face like she was reading something written there. "Why are you here? What do you want from that girl?" Xavier took a breath. "I am not here to hurt her. I am here because I made a mistake. I let her believe she was not good enough. I let her walk away, thinking she did not matter, and I need to tell her that she is wrong." The old woman said nothing for a while. The broom rested against her hip. A pigeon landed on the railing behind her. The street was quiet. "My name is Mrs. Odom," she said finally. "I live across the hall from Brianna. I have known that girl for 3 years. I watched her work herself half to death every single day, just to keep food on the table for her baby." She pointed the broom at Xavier. "If you hurt her, there will not be a building tall enough for you to hide in. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am, I understand." Mrs. Odom looked at him one more time, then she nodded slowly. She went back to her old job, night shift, housekeeping at the Grand Royale Hotel on 44th Street. She starts at 10. Xavier felt his chest loosen for the first time all day. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you so much." Mrs. Odom turned back to her sweeping. "Do not thank me. Just do not make me regret it." Xavier drove to the Grand Royale Hotel. He parked across the street at 9:45. The hotel was mid-range, 12 stories, glass doors, a small awning. Not fancy, not run down. Just a working hotel in the middle of Manhattan. He sat in his car and waited. At 10 minutes past 10, he saw her. Through the glass doors of the side entrance, the employee entrance, he could see the hallway leading to the back of the hotel. And there she was. Brianna was pushing a housekeeping cart down the hallway. She wore a gray uniform buttoned to the collar with the hotel logo on the chest. Her hair was pulled back. Her shoes were flat and practical. She moved the way she always moved. Steady, quiet, focused. There she was, working, fighting, like she always did. Xavier waited until 11:30. He knew hotel workers usually got a short break after the first 90 minutes. He walked to the side entrance and stood outside, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets. The night air was cool. The city hummed around him. Taxis passed. People walked by. No one noticed the billionaire standing outside the employee door of a hotel. At 11:32, the door opened. Brianna stepped out into the night air. She was holding a paper cup of something hot, tea probably. She took a breath and tilted her head back, eyes closed, letting the cool air wash over her face. She looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep does not fix. Then she opened her eyes, and she saw him. She froze. The cup stopped halfway to her lips. Her body went still like a person who has just heard a sound in the dark and is not sure if it is real. "Xavier," she whispered. "Hi, Brianna." They stood there, 10 feet apart. The fluorescent light from the hallway behind her spilled out onto the pavement, casting a pale glow across both of them. Somewhere inside the hotel, an industrial washing machine was rumbling. The smell of bleach and detergent hung in the air. "What are you doing here?" Brianna asked. Her voice was careful, guarded. "Looking for the person who fixed my faucet." Brianna closed her eyes for a moment. I wrote you a letter. I explained everything. You explained why you think you do not belong, Xavier said. But you are wrong. Brianna shook her head. I am not wrong, Xavier. Look at where I am. Look at what I am wearing. She gestured at her uniform. I am a hotel maid. I clean toilets for a living. I make $12 an hour. Your world eats people like me alive. You saw what happened at that dinner. You heard what they said. I heard what one person said. One person who does not matter. It is not just one person. It is everyone. Your staff, your partners, your whole world. They look at me and they see someone who does not belong. And they are right. They are not right. Xavier. My mother cleaned toilets for a living. Xavier's voice was quiet, steady, but underneath it something was shaking. She cleaned other people's houses so I could have a home. She scrubbed other people's bathrooms so I could eat dinner. She worked double shifts and night shifts and holiday shifts. She never took a day off. She never asked for anything. And she was the strongest person I ever knew. He paused. The washing machine rumbled in the distance. Until I met you. Brianna looked away. Her eyes were shining. She blinked fast, trying to hold it in. I am not asking you to be in my world, Brianna. Xavier said. He took a step closer. I am asking you to let me be in yours. Brianna looked up at him. What? Your world. The one where you wake up at 4:30 and work 3 jobs and fix pipes and raise a daughter by yourself and never give up. That world. I want to be in it. I want to understand it. I want to stand next to you in it. Not above you. Next to you. A tear slid down Brianna's cheek. She wiped it quickly with the back of her hand the same way she always did, fast, like she did not have time to cry. Why? She asked. Why do you care this much? Because you are the only person in my life who sees what is broken and fixes it without being asked. Because you told me the truth when everyone else told me what I wanted to hear. Because every day since you left that faucet in my penthouse has been working perfectly, and every day since you left nothing else in my life has. Brianna laughed. A small, wet, broken laugh. The kind that comes out when you are trying not to cry and failing. That is a terrible reason, she said. It is the best reason I have. They stood there for a long moment. The night air moved between them. The city breathed. Somewhere down the block, a taxi honked. Inside the hotel, the washing machine finished its cycle and went quiet. I do not need you to save me, Brianna said softly. I have never needed saving. I know, Xavier said. That is exactly why I am here. Silence, long and deep. Brianna looked at him. She searched his face the way she searched a pipe joint, carefully looking for the flaw, the crack, the thing that would break under pressure. But she did not find one. Okay, she said. But I am not quitting this job. Not until I know this is real. Xavier smiled. The first real smile in days. Deal. Brianna took a sip of her tea. It was cold now. She did not care. She leaned against the wall next to him, shoulder to shoulder, both of them standing outside the employee entrance of a mid-range hotel on 44th Street in the middle of the night. It was not a penthouse. It was not a gala. It was not a fancy restaurant with cloth napkins and candles. It was a hallway that smelled like bleach. And it was the most honest place either of them had ever been. Brianna did not come back to Bennett Capital as Xavier's personal assistant. She was very clear about that. I am not going back to answering your phones and scheduling your meetings, she said. That was never the right job for me. We both know that. Xavier agreed, because he had already thought about it, and he had a different idea. Bennett Capital had a facilities management department, a small team that handled building maintenance, repairs, equipment, and vendor coordination for all the company's properties. It was not a glamorous department. It did not make headlines or close deals, but it was essential. And it needed someone who understood buildings from the inside out, someone who could look at a broken pipe and know the difference between a quick patch and a real fix, someone who paid attention. Brianna started in the department the following Monday. Her title was Facilities Coordinator. Her job was to assist the building operations team with inspections, maintenance scheduling, and emergency repairs across Bennett Capital's portfolio of properties. It was not a favor. It was not charity. It was a job that matched her skills. And Brianna was good at it from day one. She still kept her night shift at the hotel. She worked at Bennett Capital from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, picked up Amara from school, spent the evening with her, then went to the Grand Royale from 10 to 6. She slept 4 hours a night, sometimes 3. It was hard, it was exhausting, but it was honest, and for Brianna, honest was all that mattered. Xavier also did something else. He enrolled Brianna in a certificate program at Bronx Community College. It was a plumbing and building maintenance certification, a 12-month program that met 2 evenings a week. Now, most people do not know this, but community colleges across America offer hundreds of certificate programs that do not require a 4-year degree. Programs in plumbing, electrical work, HVAC building, maintenance, medical coding, and dozens of other fields. They are affordable, they are practical, and they lead directly to real jobs with real salaries. For people like Brianna, people who already had the skills but not the credentials, a certificate could be the difference between $12 an hour and $30. Brianna started classes in September. Tuesday and Thursday nights, 6 to 9. Mrs. Odom watched Amara. Brianna came home smelling like PVC cement and copper flux, her notebooks full of diagrams and code references. She was learning things Pops had taught her years ago, but now she was learning the language for them, the official names, the building codes, the regulations. She was turning instinct into expertise, and slowly, carefully, things between Brianna and Xavier began to change. It did not happen all at once. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic declaration. It was small things, quiet things. Xavier started coming by her desk around noon with 2 sandwiches from the deli across the street. They would eat together in the break room, talking about work, about buildings, about Amara's latest drawings from school. On weekends, Xavier started visiting the apartment in the Bronx. Not to take Brianna somewhere fancy, just to be there. He sat on the floor with Amara and built towers out of blocks. He read her bedtime stories in funny voices that made her laugh so hard she snorted. He helped Brianna fix the cabinet door in the kitchen that had been hanging crooked for months. One Saturday afternoon, Amara looked up at Xavier with her big brown eyes and asked, "Are you Mama's friend?" Xavier looked at Brianna. She was standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot, trying very hard to pretend she had not heard the question. Xavier smiled. "I am trying to be," he said. Amara thought about this for a moment. Then she nodded satisfied and went back to her coloring book. At the office, something else was shifting. Renee Whitfield, who had once questioned everything about Brianna's presence, was starting to see her differently. Brianna was not the best employee at Bennett Capital. She was not the most polished or the most educated, but she was the most consistent. She showed up every day. She did her work without complaint. She learned fast, and she was the only person in the entire company who told Xavier Bennett when he was wrong. One afternoon, Renee overheard Brianna on the phone with a contractor who was trying to overcharge for a routine repair. Brianna's voice was calm but firm. "That is a $40 coupling joint, and you know it. I will not approve a $600 invoice for a 10-minute fix. Send me a revised estimate, or I will find someone who will." Renee stood in the hallway and listened. When Brianna hung up, Renee walked past and said nothing. But later that day, she was standing by the coffee machine with a colleague, and the colleague asked, "So what do you think of the new facilities girl?" Renee took a sip of her coffee. "Maybe I was wrong about her." 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday evening, Xavier invited Brianna to the Penthouse. It was only the second time she had been there. The first time, she had walked in for a job interview and fixed a leaking faucet before sitting down. That felt like a lifetime ago. The Penthouse looked the same. The marble floors, the glass walls, the view of Central Park stretching out below like a dark green ocean in the fading light. The coffee machine still hummed in the kitchen. But something was different this time. There were 2 mugs on the counter. Not 1, 2, Brianna noticed. She did not say anything, but she noticed. Xavier led her to the kitchen. He opened a drawer near the sink and took out something small. He held it up between his thumb and finger. It was a rubber washer, old, worn, slightly misshapen. The same washer Brianna had found inside his faucet the day they met. "You kept it?" Brianna asked, surprised. "It is the most important thing anyone has ever given me," Xavier said, "and you did not even know you were giving it." He set the washer on the counter and poured her a cup of coffee. They sat on the sofa, the same sofa where Brianna had sat during her interview, and Xavier began to talk. He told her about his mother. Not the short version he had shared before, the full story. Every detail. Gloria Bennett had worked as a housekeeper at a hotel in downtown Chicago. She did not call in sick, she did not take vacations, she did not complain. She cleaned rooms for 16 years straight, 5 days a week, sometimes 6, and she put every spare dollar into a savings account for Xavier's future. She started getting headaches when Xavier was 14. Bad ones. The kind that made her sit down in the middle of the hallway and close her eyes. She did not go to a doctor. She said she could not afford to miss a shift. She said the headaches would pass. They did not pass. On a Tuesday morning when Xavier was 16 years old, Gloria collapsed in room 412 of the Lakeside Grand Hotel. She was making the bed. The fitted sheet was still in her hands when she fell. A stroke. Massive. By the time the paramedics arrived, she was gone. Xavier was the one who identified her body. He stood in the hospital hallway alone. No father, no siblings, no family. Just a boy in a t-shirt 2 sizes too big staring at a door he was afraid to open. "I built everything I have because of her," Xavier said, his voice low. "Every building, every deal, every dollar. I built it all because I was terrified that if I stopped, if I was not rich enough, strong enough, I would not be able to protect the people I love. I would lose them the way I lost her." He paused. His hands were clasped together. His jaw was tight. "And then I met you, and you scared me, Brianna, because you reminded me of her. The same strength, the same stubbornness, the same refusal to ask for help. And I thought, if I just give her enough, if I just fix enough things around her, maybe I can save her. Maybe I can do what I could not do for my mother." The penthouse was quiet. The city glowed below. The coffee was getting cold. Brianna looked at him for a long time. She did not rush to speak. She let the silence breathe. Then, she said something that Xavier had never heard from anyone in his entire life. "You have been trying to save your mother in every person you meet. But Xavier, you cannot fix everything. Sometimes the bravest thing is not fixing. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting someone help you." Xavier did not move. He stared at the floor. His jaw trembled. His eyes filled slowly the way a glass fills from the bottom up, quiet and steady and impossible to stop. A tear fell. Then another. Then his shoulders shook. And Xavier Bennett, the man who had not cried in 18 years, the man who had built a billion-dollar empire on discipline and control and never showing weakness, broke down on his own sofa in his own penthouse with the city lights shining through the windows like a million tiny witnesses. Brianna did not hug him. She did not say it was okay. She did not try to fix it. She just sat there, next to him, close enough that their shoulders were touching, and she stayed. That was all she did. She stayed. That night, for the first time in 18 years, Xavier did not feel alone, and neither did Brianna. 1 year later, everything was different. And nothing was different, both at the same time. Brianna had completed her certificate program. She graduated with the highest marks in her class. Xavier sat in the audience at Bronx Community College in a plastic folding chair, surrounded by families cheering and children running in the aisles. He clapped louder than anyone. Brianna had been promoted to building operations manager at Bennett Capital. She oversaw maintenance and repairs for the company's entire portfolio. She had a team of 8. She had a real salary. She had health insurance for the first time in her life. Amara was in 1st grade now. She had her own bed in a new apartment, a small 2-bedroom place, still in the Bronx, that Brianna had found and paid for herself. It was not fancy. The kitchen was small, and the hallway was narrow. But it was theirs. Brianna had earned every square foot of it. She still had Pops's toolbox. It sat in the living room now, not in a dark corner, but on a shelf near the window where the light hit it in the mornings. On a quiet Saturday evening in October, Xavier showed up at Brianna's old apartment, the studio, the one with the broken sofa and the thin walls and the pipes that groaned at night. Brianna was there packing the last of her things. She was moving out the next day. Xavier stood in the doorway. He looked around the tiny room. The cardboard boxes stacked against the wall, the bare mattress, the curtain that used to separate Amara's bed from the rest of the apartment, the water stain on the ceiling that had never gotten smaller, and in the corner, the broken sofa. Still there, still sagging, still propped up on a stack of old phone books. "I want to do something," Xavier said. "Before you leave this place." Brianna looked at him. "What?" Xavier walked over to the sofa. He stood in front of it for a moment. Then he got down on one knee. Brianna's breath stopped. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. He opened it. Inside was a ring. It was not the biggest diamond. It was not the flashiest setting. But it was beautiful, simple, real. "Brianna," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were full. "I do not want to give you a new life. I want to share the one you already built. You built it with your bare hands. You built it in this apartment on this sofa on 3 hours of sleep and cold coffee and a toolbox your grandfather left you. And it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." He paused. "I do not need you to be someone else. I do not need you to fit into my world. I just need you to let me sit next to you, on this broken sofa, for the rest of my life." Brianna looked at him. Her eyes were wet. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the ring. She looked at the sofa. She looked at the apartment where she had cried herself to sleep more times than she could count. The apartment where she had prayed for something good to happen. The apartment where she had whispered into the dark just this once, "Let something good happen." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Xavier. Yes." From behind the curtain, a small voice screamed. "Mama said yes." Amara came running out and launched herself onto Xavier's back, nearly knocking him over. He laughed and caught her. Brianna laughed and cried at the same time. And the three of them sat on that broken sofa tangled together, holding on tight. The sofa was broken. The apartment was small. The ring was not the biggest, but it was the most real thing either of them had ever felt. The wedding was small. That was intentional. Brianna did not want a ballroom. Xavier did not want cameras. They wanted the people who mattered. That was it. They held the ceremony in a community garden in the Bronx, 3 blocks from Brianna's old apartment. It was a Sunday afternoon in May. The sky was clear. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and the roses that someone had planted along the fence years ago. Mrs. Odom sat in the front row wearing a blue dress she had bought special for the occasion, and a hat so wide it blocked the view of the person behind her. She did not care. She cried before the ceremony even started. Renee Whitfield sat 2 rows back in a sharp black dress, her posture perfect as always. But her eyes were soft. She had come not as Xavier's chief of staff. She had come as Brianna's friend. And that was something neither of them would have predicted a year ago. A few colleagues from Bennett Capital were there. The doorman from Xavier's building, the one who had once looked at Brianna like she did not belong, was there too. Xavier had invited him personally. The man had apologized to Brianna months ago, quietly, privately, and she had accepted without hesitation. Because that was who she was. And in the front, holding a small basket of flower petals, was Amara. She wore a white dress with a yellow ribbon in her hair. She had practiced walking down the aisle 11 times in the living room the night before. She took the job very seriously. When Brianna walked down the aisle, she was not wearing a designer gown. She wore a simple white dress she had found at a small boutique in Harlem. It was elegant and clean, and it fit her perfectly. She carried no bouquet. Instead, she carried Pop's old wrench in her left hand, wrapped in a white ribbon. It was the same wrench from the toolbox he had left her, the same one she had used 1,000 times to fix things that other people could not be bothered to notice. Xavier saw it and smiled. He understood. They wrote their own vows. They kept them short. Brianna said, "I promise to fix what is broken and to leave alone what is not. I promise to pay attention. Always." Xavier said, "I promise to stop trying to save everyone and to start showing up for the people who matter, starting with you, starting today." The pastor pronounced them husband and wife. Amara threw her flower petals in the air and shouted, "Finally," and the whole garden laughed. It was not the biggest wedding. It was not the fanciest. But every person there meant something, and every word spoken was true. 6 months after the wedding, Brianna opened Pop's workshop. It was a free vocational training program housed in a renovated storefront in the South Bronx. The sign above the door was hand-painted. It read, "Pop's Workshop. Learn to fix things. Learn to fix your life." The program taught basic plumbing, electrical repair, and building maintenance to single mothers and young adults from low-income backgrounds. Brianna designed the curriculum herself based on everything Pops had taught her and everything she had learned at community college. Xavier helped with funding and space. But the vision was Brianna's. Every inch of it. She taught classes 3 days a week. She wore work boots and a tool belt, and she got down on her knees next to her students and showed them how to read a pipe joint, how to find a leak, how to shut off a main valve, how to hold a wrench so it did not slip. She taught them the way Pops had taught her, with patience, with respect, with the belief that knowing how to fix something was not just a skill, it was dignity. One afternoon, a young woman walked into the workshop. She was maybe 19 or 20. Her clothes were wrinkled, her shoes had holes near the toe. Her eyes were red and tired, like someone who had not slept well in weeks. She stood in the doorway and looked around at the workbenches and the tools and the students, and she looked like she might turn around and leave. But she did not leave. She walked up to Brianna and said in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "Can you teach me? I do not have any skills. I do not have anything." Brianna looked at the young woman. She saw the tired eyes, the worn shoes, the fear. She saw herself, standing in the doorway of a penthouse, holding a wrinkled blouse she had ironed with a pot, wondering if she was enough. Brianna smiled. "That is exactly what I said once." She pulled out a chair. "Sit down. Let me tell you a story about a leaking faucet." And as Brianna began to speak, Xavier watched from the doorway of the workshop. He did not interrupt. He did not need to. His heart was full. He had everything he had ever wanted. Not because of the money, not because of the buildings, or the deals, or the title, but because the woman he loved had taken every hard thing life had thrown at her and turned it into something that would help someone else stand up. That is what this story is about. Not money, not romance, not fairy tales. It is about character. It is about what you do when no one is watching and no one is asking. Brianna proved that the moment she fixed a faucet in a stranger's kitchen, she did not do it for a reward. She did not do it to impress anyone. She did it because something was broken, and she knew how to fix it. That is character. And character does not need a degree. It does not need a title. It does not need permission. The world tells single mothers they are not enough. It tells them they need more education, more experience, more credentials, more everything. Brianna proved that being enough has nothing to do with diplomas or bank accounts. It has to do with showing up. It has to do with paying attention. It has to do with refusing to walk past something broken when you have the hands to fix it. And sometimes the people who fix things for a living are the same people who can fix what is broken inside us. Xavier was a billionaire with a penthouse and a view of Central Park, and he could not fix the loneliness inside his own chest. But a woman with a wrench and a 10-cent washer could. Because she did not try to fix him, she just stayed. And sometimes staying is the bravest repair of all. Now, I want to be honest with you for a moment. This story is fictional. Brianna and Xavier are not real people. I made them up, but the struggles in this story are very real. There are millions of Briannas out there right now. Single mothers working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, skipping meals so their children can eat. People with incredible skills that the world does not value because those skills did not come with a diploma. I wrote this story because I believe we need to change the way we see people, Not through their resumes, not through their zip codes, not through the clothes they wear or the car they drive, but through their actions, through what they do when no one is watching. If you are a Brianna watching this right now, if you are someone who feels invisible, someone who has been told you are not enough, someone who works harder than anyone around you and still feels like the world does not see you, I want you to know something. Your hands tell a story that no degree ever could. The calluses on your palms, the strength in your back, the knowledge in your fingers, that is your resume, and it matters. You matter. Pops said it best. Fixing things is not about the thing. It is about paying attention. Pay attention to the people around you. Pay attention to the ones the world overlooks, because you never know. The person fixing your faucet today might be the person who fixes your heart tomorrow. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged for what you look like instead of what you can do? Or have you ever met someone who completely surprised you with who they really were? I would love to hear your story. If this video made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know whose life might change because of a story about a leaking faucet and a woman brave enough to fix it. There is another story coming soon that I think will move you even more. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss it. Thank you so much for watching. May you always be seen for who you truly are, not for what you have. And may you never walk past something broken when you have the hands to fix it. God bless you.